folks become members to support the theater, the mission of the theater, the value it provides to the community, the arts generally, the films obviously, but far fewer for the discount. Many folks are have not become members because you know, the tickets are cheaper, or I guess tickets are cheaper. I guess not concessions are not part of that. But so you know, there is this, you know, when you think about and the board talked about this, you know, when growing the membership is an important goal. You know, what are those arguments that we make to people to grow the membership? And it's sounds like the nice argument, the compelling argument is to support community theater, to support arts in this area of the state, you know, high quality films, and you know, less, you get cheaper tickets. So we thought the board thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's a great communication piece, right? Because usually when you join like some sort of membership or something, the main argument is what are you going to get out of it? But actually what we're finding is for the folks who are members, it's not about what they're getting. The perks are really just sort of secondary or tertiary. It really comes down to, yeah, we're doing this because we feel like it's an important thing to the community, and we love the films that you guys put out. So if you're going to market how to bring on better or bring on more members, you need to rethink your marketing, right? Your marketing shouldn't focus on what they're going to get, but rather what it does for the community, because that's what really attracts your members overall. Which is kind of a neat way to do that, right? Totally changes the way you would sort of talk about it. 80% of non-members, so folks who are not members, we asked them, were they even aware of the membership? 80% are aware. And their barriers are really that they're not sure they can maximize the benefits. So again, this gets back to, they've got a benefit idea of how membership works, and if we can shift that a little bit to a much more community-based idea, it's likely you could actually shift them over to become members. See what I mean? Because that's ultimately what sort of drives people to their membership once they're in it, especially, to sort of like their membership more. So I think it's really a question of 22% it's cost. Okay, that's fair, right? But if you've got half who are just thinking about the benefits, then it becomes a question of, well, maybe we should reframe how we sort of talk about that, right? Which is kind of interesting. Let's see.
So the other, a quarter are folks from out of town, right? I'm outside of Concord. I'm too far away from the theater. Why would I become a member? So that's another opportunity area, right? So how do you connect people who are outside of the kind of the immediate geographic area to say, you know, become members because there are these other benefits?
Actually, let's try something else. Because your board didn't think this, right? Short of the greater Concord area, where do you think your next highest group of folks come from? What region?
Lakes region.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought for some reason they'd be coming up from
Manchester,
right? And that's actually not true. This goes to Karen and I have this suspicion that the toll booth creates this huge barrier that people just like, oh, I can't go on that side of the toll booth, right? Like it's just a thing. I think the toll booth just makes a thing. But it was really super interesting that we sort of had this conversation and they were like, well, where's the next? It's got to be Manchester. Or actually even the discussion of the Seacoast came up. And no, it's absolutely the Lakes region. So yeah, kind of interesting. Suggestions to improve would be things like reduced discount tickets, reduced concession prices, free passes, free popcorn. More member-only events kind of came up. And then improved communication. So can we talk about the birthday pass? Because there was even a board member who wasn't aware of their birthday pass. Do you remember that? Well, no, not just you. When we gave the presentation, there was somebody who was like, there's a birthday pass? So apparently birthday passes are not well known. So yeah, so more notification about things like renewals and birthday pass and stuff like that. And of course, general communications were some of the things that folks said. But I mean, to be fair, most people were said, you know, I have no suggestions. They're pretty happy. Yeah.
Jimmy, you know what I was thinking? It just reminded me of that. Is that the next time we do the brochures is rewording it instead of saying a free movie pass during your birthday or in your birthday month or whatever. Saying like one free entrance because people think that it's going to get sent to them.
They're going to get it in the mail or email or something.
And that's exactly what the comments were.
Yeah.
Like
right.
I didn't get told I got a birthday pass. Like,
yeah, I would love to get to the point where we are doing that, where we're reminding everybody in March, at the beginning of March, you're all the March birthdays, don't forget, you know, to use it. But
we could even just put up a sign for now that says like, remember your birthday thing. because
Yeah,
people
or
aren't
I just
reading.
wrote it down as a slide. Let's
Yeah.
get it up on the slides.
Yeah, because most people don't actually read the brochure. Like, they just look at the prices and then, because the birthday benefits like halfway down, they probably stop reading.
That's a really
Oh,
good
the
point
me-
about
oh,
voting though.
The membership
2%
brochure,
insurance.
yeah, you're right, that they probably just,
Right.
go right to filling it out.
All right, so we asked a couple questions about looking ahead. So I just want to be clear before we get into this that overall people are very, very happy, right? Most of the suggestions are all improvement oriented. There's no real red flags, and your board right now you're in strategic planning still, right?
We went through, so right after we met with you.
Right, with Ellen.
Yep.
Are you done? You can't be done. yet.
Well, she's gonna meet with us this month.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're still in it, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So
This is geared, that's the strategic planning coming, because the board was
Right.
kind of discussing this.
So we just kind of want to hit a couple things. There were a lot of ideas for programs, for events that folks kind of threw out there. We asked them, what were your ideas for sort of the future? What are some of the things that we could do? So some of them were more foreign films. I want to point out again, remember that I talked about the genre list, that foreign films weren't listed in there. So I would say if you're thinking, gee, they want more foreign films, you might also want to think about the categories people cared about, which were drama, comedy, and
Documentary.
documentary,
probably,
yeah. More cult films and more classic films. Other ideas that were mentioned were the counter viewpoints. So I want to caveat this. This again, it's this perceived idea of balance. So I wouldn't put too much stock in this. How
There were not that many people.
yeah, we're not talking a lot
Yeah.
of folks mentioned this, but this gets back to that whole idea that the documentaries and films that that are shown here tend to have what some people think are a liberal bias. So again, take the political hat off for a second and consider that viewpoint, counter viewpoint, it would not necessarily work in a film sort of structure, right? So I point that out saying maybe that's something you want to think about for panels, but I would really sort of consider whether or not that really makes sense in regards to film. That said, films that promote civil discourse, this one came up a little bit, would be the idea of thinking about civil discourse a little bit differently and how people can talk to each other on particular issues, difficult issues. Art films, and then getting new releases earlier. Again, to the extent that you can control such things. And again, infrastructure. Do you want to take this? We're back to
Yep,
the,
well,
we're back to the
again,
entrance.
what, the entrance, right? The streamlining the ticket process, and I know that's under discussion, right? So how do you get people moving through more quickly? The parking, again, you got some constraints there, but, Jemmy, you pointed that out. I didn't know that about the handicaps on every floor, the handicap spaces on every floor. So, validated parking was suggested, free parking, and then just more parking availability.
The other handicap option is you are allowed to, my mom has one, and I've got one in my car from her,
Oh, just
that
the.
you can hang it
Hang
and
your
park anywhere,
Mhm.
Yeah.
except in somebody's
Personal space,
business slot, out there. But of the ones that are open to the public, you can park wherever you want with
Yeah.
Yeah, so concessions, more variety, higher quality, price reduction, discounts, particularly for new members, that one kind of was a thought. And then movie times, half hour later on weekdays, this one was the most common request. So it wasn't just, hey, we want later start times, but even just a half hour later might help people navigate,
Yeah.
work and getting off work and sort of meeting up. More matinees, morning movies on weekends was one that came up quite a bit, and then the
with
Sunday night movies.
especially.
Oh, we can't do movies on Sundays though. There's a church here.
There's a church, right.
Yeah, no, yeah,
folks
I-
didn't-
I-
They don't know
folks
that.
don't know that.
They don't know
I don't
that,
know
right?
that, but hey.
I think we're talking about night movies.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So communications, and specifically add the information about run length. That seems to be the one that comes up. Work on the website. That's a big one that we keep hearing about. Put the schedule out ahead of time. Emails seem to work. So again, the vast majority of folks are still getting their stuff from emails. So moving to social media might be nice, but again, consider who your main audience is and how you might migrate them over to that. That's going to be a question. And then ticketing. Greater senior discount. Only a few folks mentioned this though.
Yeah.
no convenience fee, which again gets to the online ticketing, and then the ticketing staff training.
Yeah.
And more PSAs to stop the chatter. So apparently the talking thing is a thing. It's a real big thing. Again, we like buzz, but not that much buzz was sort of where that was going. So there were some suggestions from Sarah and Angie about potential things they might want to do in the future. So they just kind of came up with 3, like, hey, what if we did a program or a set of films or things on these particular topics? This is where it got super interesting. People really like this theater because they find it so thought-provoking, and they like to be challenged, and they sort of really want documentaries. And then for some reason, when we put these topics out there, folks are like, yeah, no, we don't want to talk about those issues, which we found really fascinating. But what was interesting was we had an open-ended after this to say, well, what would you be interested in? And it was like social issues, which I don't know. I will say the discourse issue came up, right? Civil discourse. We know that one came up, that people are sort of talking about how do you have conversations, which is really interesting. I mean, there's been some really cool like underground films and stuff that really have been talking about how to have conversations about race and the criminal justice reform system and sort of thinking about those sorts of things. But these particular issues, folks were not as hot on.
I would just, obviously our demographic is 55 to 75, so
Yeah.
they want to see things like how do you deal with death and, you know, stuff like that, that their lives reflect. But then obviously
Caregiving.
bringing some of this stuff.
Wow! Tell me more about my own mortality. I'm loving this.
I mean,
Cancer.
it's true, absolutely.
Yeah.
They do come in and they do talk about like,
Sure.
oh, my sister's going through this and, you know, whatever, just stuff that they're dealing with. So that generation is not dealing with as much
Right.
of this stuff. But then if we don't show this kind of stuff, we're not getting new people in here.
Right.
Right.
And that's the tension, right?
Yeah,
That's the, you know.
Actually, you perfectly explained what I think is your tension. On one hand, if you're doing a strategic planning process, which you guys are doing right now at the board level, right? Strategic planning is typically looking for the next 5 to 10 years, which means these folks will be the 65 plus. They're moving into not just senior, but they're going to be moving into the older old, right? And what that means is you have to figure out how to attract a younger audience that's going to backfill who you're eventually going to lose over time, right? People don't want to come out to night movies because as you get older, you tend to not want to drive out at night anymore, which you notice might be part of the reason why you're getting the request to have weekend movies and Sunday matinees and all these other types of things, because people are thinking about, right? They're aging, they're not going to be wanting to go out at night as much anymore. They might be retiring, I'm not going out after work. These kinds of things are coming up. So to that point, how are you going to attract your next generation down? How are you going to age them in, right? Because part of that is your biggest challenge here. And to your point, these might be it, but for some of the young families we talked to that were on the survey, these didn't rank high either. Even when we broke these out by age, they didn't rank high even when we looked at the younger folks who responded. I mean, the majority of your folks were 55 to 74. But not everybody. And even when we broke this out by younger age demographics, these didn't rank out very high either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the younger folks we tended to hear from were families, young families. So what we heard from them was more family films, right? Things they could bring the kids to. So this might be even, you know, that generation, well, you guys, right? You know, how does this theater attract you folks?
The future.
You know, is it topics like this? What is it? You know, we didn't hear from a lot of folks your age in the survey, as you saw earlier. But I think, as Melissa was saying, the tension is, you know, how does the theater attract new folks, younger folks, while still keeping what's a pretty core constituency, right? Members. You know, folks who come regularly are the older folks right now, so you've got to still you got to keep them happy too, right? So it's a balancing act. And when you've got, you know, only a certain number of hours that the theater's available, how do you balance what is offered to different groups? Wait, do we have anything else about?
Yep. So it is important to point out that you do have a kind of a narrow demographic. That's kind of in this group, right? Again, very high incomes, older generation, older, not oldest old, but older. But for the most part, they're pretty happy. So to that point, you're gonna want to keep them happy, right? Because that's your bread and butter. That's your core group who's coming pretty regularly, who's making sure that they maintain their memberships. You don't want to lose them. But at the same time, if you're looking at sort of the next 10 years, you have to figure out how are we going to be attracting the next group who will hopefully be our next core coming through. And so that's sort of a challenge I think you guys are going to have over the next 10 years, is to sort of think about, what are the things that are going to bring people in. Maybe it is, an event that sort of looks at death and dying, or heck, even healthcare. I mean, it's hard to not listen to sort of the platforms today and common discourse and not hear the two things that are most important to people, despite the fact that it didn't get a high ranking here, which is climate change and healthcare. But healthcare for sure, if you're thinking about your mortality, that's where it's going to go, right?
I mean, I would even come to a session about healthcare.
Yeah.
That would be informative for me and my generation, and things that I could do. to help with that,
Absolutely.
so.
I mean, everything from death and dying to sort of how we sort of navigate healthcare in the U.S., why we're so different from, I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there to talk about when it comes to healthcare and how we think about healthcare, how we manage healthcare. What does palliative care even look like in the U.S., and is it effective for what we need it to be? So to your point about if that's where people are thinking, then maybe that is the venue. I will say nobody mentioned it on here, but also nobody mentioned death and dying either. But you could be totally right that could be,
They always
right? And it'd be worth it to sort of do a spot check on people and sort of say, hey, would you be interested in that?
Are you dying?
Hey, do you want to have a
For you?
conversation about death and dying? You'd be surprised though how many people will attend that. It does happen.
The Center for Health Promotion has done a lot of things
Yeah.
here that are
Right,
popular.
or, partnering with a hospital system or something like that would be.
Or heck, even UNH has a really good, once their Masters of Public Health in Manchester did this great evening panel on death and dying, and I went just because it was fascinating, and I was like, let's hear what they have to say. But it was a packed house. There had to be about, what can their auditorium hold? 250, 300 people? Yeah, who came just to hear people talk about it, not even see a short film and then talk about it.
I was just thinking, because obviously my death and dying comment was about our current.
Yeah.
That's just because they do come in, they'll talk to you a lot about it. They'll see a movie or whatever, and if someone dies in it, they're like, oh, that was cathartic, or that was harder than I thought it was going to be because of this, or I came to bring my sister just to get out of the house because she's
Because
dealing with death or
they're
whatever.
more living with it, right?
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But I was thinking, because younger generations, let's say 30 and under, get most of their information digitally, most of the stuff that we're capable of playing here is, independent film, and that's not getting a huge budget for marketing. So a lot of people, they'll see the names of the movies, but they have no idea what it is. So just having the stuff that we have out, it's that's not going to get them in here because they don't even know what the movies are.
Right.
So I was just we were talking about this a few months ago or whatever, but just having a Red River Theater, the Oscar night, but do it for younger people, earlier in the day even maybe, or do something like that, maybe before the late night one, have a morning one, and then, or whatever, I don't know.
Do you guys do any work with NHTI right here?
No, not
Do you offer them a free,
Yeah, they
a
have
free day to
$5
come in
tickets.
to
They
see?
have
they get
$5 tickets, but no one
tickets.
knows about it except the staff.
So they don't know about. Oh yeah, okay.
Oh,
so
no,
just
it's
the
in
staff
their
knows.
newsletter every single week.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's also a transient.
It is. It is
So it's
absolutely.
hard. But the people that do take advantage of it certainly
Yeah.
Appreciate
find
it.
find the value in it. But it is hard to. So we tried to do different things in the past, but it's like a people are
Yeah.
reading a lot. It's really hard to get this.
I mean, I just wonder if it'd be worth it to work with a faculty member and say, hey.